In 1999, a small company named Amazon was losing money hand over fist, barely scraping by on razor-thin margins, yet somehow, against all odds, and despite the skepticism of nearly every investor who glanced at its financial statements, it became one of the most valuable companies in the world. And today, AI is repeating that story, except the stakes are unimaginably larger, measured not in billions, but in trillions, with a global economy hanging in the balance. Everyone seems to agree on the headline. And it's the kind of headline that makes people feel safe nodding along without thinking too deeply. That this is a bubble, too much money flowing in too quickly, too much hype spilling out of every press release, blog post and earnings call.
Hollywood's increasingly complicated relationship with the technology.
Though AI does risk drawing backlash from creators and fans, and it could raise concerns from the actors and writers unions.
Too many promises, most of which can't possibly all come true at the same time.
AI to go from the labs into the world. This is about the AI industrial revolution arriving. It's a very big deal.
Yet, the market behaves as if they might. And when everyone agrees on something in markets, that's usually where the real danger begins. Not because prices are high, but because the reasons behind the prices and the motivations, the incentives and the risks are almost always far more fragile than anyone realizes until it's too late. Because bubbles, as history has repeatedly shown us, are not dangerous merely because prices rise or fall. They're dangerous because of why prices rise, because of the faith that people place in trends they cannot control, and because of who is ultimately on the hook when something inevitably goes wrong. Let me take you back again to a story that most people remember only in broad strokes. In 1999, Amazon was bleeding cash while other dot-com companies were being celebrated for the smallest glimmers of promise, and yet some of the most sophisticated investors quietly kept pouring money into it, not because they understood exactly how the business would succeed, but because they understood the principles of transformation, the idea that some companies, given enough time and capital, could reshape entire industries and generate returns that were impossible to imagine in the short term. Fast forward to today, and AI is in a similar phase. The market is dominated by a small group of massive companies who are carrying most of the weight, whose costs are rising faster than revenues, and whose public statements rely heavily on products and outcomes that have not yet materialized. Yet the flow of capital continues with an almost unstoppable momentum, as if the market refuses to acknowledge the fragility underneath. If this level of investment and optimism were happening in any other sector, most people would already be sounding alarms. And yet the money keeps flowing, not cautiously, not in measured steps, but aggressively, as though the fear of missing out outweighs the fear of failure. And the words of Warren Buffett echo through this reality more than ever. Be fearful when others are greedy, and greedy when others are fearful. Right now, most people are fearful, and yet the investors who understand the mechanics behind these movements are seeing opportunity in infrastructure, opportunity in technology, opportunity in positioning for a world that has not yet arrived, but is being shaped before our very eyes. So instead of asking whether AI is overhyped, which it almost certainly is in many respects, a more important question is why the hype hasn't collapsed under its own weight, especially when historically markets have not tolerated such imbalances for very long. The dot-com bubble did not collapse because people suddenly realized that websites were inherently useless. It collapsed because the financing underpinning the companies broke down, because the structures that had temporarily sustained valuations could no longer hold when stress and scrutiny arrived. The housing bubble did not burst because homes suddenly lost their appeal. It burst because the debt that supported it was unsustainable, because the system that promised stability relied on loans that could not be serviced when rates shifted, and because the human and institutional errors compounded until the inevitable failure arrived. And Japan's lost decade serves as a warning about what happens when debt grows faster than growth over decades. The economy limps forward, markets stagnate, and generations pay the price for decisions made long before they were born. So if AI is just speculative mania, why hasn't a similar reckoning happened yet? The answer lies in the fundamentals behind the money. Unlike many previous bubbles that relied heavily on borrowed capital, derivatives, or continuous inflows from uninformed investors, the money driving AI investment today has largely already been earned. For over a decade, the largest technology companies in the world have quietly amassed enormous cash reserves, not out of a grand strategic plan, but because tax structures, cautious management, and a lack of sufficiently compelling projects prevented them from spending it. For years, critics complained that these companies were too conservative, too focused on protecting margins, too unwilling to take risks that might have transformed markets sooner. But AI changed all of that. Suddenly, there was a justification for spending hundreds of billions of dollars up front with the promise of productivity gains and societal transformations in the future. And because these investments were funded with cash rather than debt, there was no immediate pressure to unwind them if something went wrong, no margin calls, no forced selling, no moment of reckoning that would instantly deflate the bubble. And so, the traditional warning signs of overinvestment, regulatory threats, chip restrictions, legal uncertainty, rising interest rates have been absorbed, shrugged off, or reinterpreted as temporary obstacles rather than existential threats. Consider for a moment the story of a single data center built in the middle of nowhere. Analysts laughed, they scoffed at the cost, the isolation, the sheer audacity of building infrastructure at such a scale. And yet, years later, that center became the backbone for AI models that would generate billions in revenue, enabling innovations that change the way entire industries functioned. Sometimes what looks excessive today is the foundation for tomorrow. What makes this moment even more complex is how intertwined everything has become. The same companies funding research are buying infrastructure. The same firms selling chips are investing in their biggest customers, creating a web of financial interconnections that from the outside can look circular, risky and unstable, and yet from the inside represents a strategy designed to capture value across every possible outcome, a hedge against being left out of the technological revolution entirely. Nvidia, OpenAI, Microsoft, and countless others are not simply gambling blindly, they are building ecosystems, investing in each other, creating a network where success in one area reinforces success elsewhere, and failure, while costly, is mitigated by scale, cash reserves, and diversification. The danger here isn't bankruptcy. Most of these companies have enough cash to survive almost any plausible scenario. The danger is that trillions of dollars are being locked into infrastructure, talent, and models that may never achieve the returns projected, leading not to headlines of catastrophe, but to years of disappointment, revisions, and recalibrations that quietly reshape the market over time. And yet the stakes for humanity extend beyond balance sheets. Jobs, wealth, retirement savings, and even the pace of innovation are intertwined with this bubble, meaning the outcomes, good or bad, will ripple through societies in ways most people cannot fully predict. Throughout history, every major technological shift has had moments like this. Railroads, electricity, automobiles, and computers all experienced phases where hype far exceeded measurable progress, yet those who understood the systems, the capital flows, and the structural foundations often emerged not just intact, but dominant, shaping the future in ways that could not have been predicted in the moment. So yes, AI could be in a bubble, but not the kind that explodes overnight. More likely, it's a slow-moving, sprawling phenomenon where expectations, capital, and reality eventually collide. And when that happens, some will win, some will lose, and the lessons learned will ripple for decades. The question isn't whether AI changes the world, it will. The question is whether the cost we are paying today aligns with the world we will actually inhabit tomorrow, because understanding the incentives, the risks, and the extraordinary scale of what is happening is not just an intellectual exercise, it is a survival strategy, a blueprint for anyone who wants to navigate a world where the stakes are in the trillions, where hype meets infrastructure, and where human ingenuity meets the immovable force of capital.